Part 1: The Illusion of Power. A $500 drone. That's all it took. Not a missile. Not a jet. Not a billion-dollar weapons program. Just a plastic quadcopter, a grenade taped underneath. And a guy who learned to fly it on weekends. And it destroyed a tank worth $3 million. You've seen clips like this. Maybe Ukraine. Maybe the Middle East. Maybe somewhere you couldn't even place on a map. A smaller force, fewer troops, less money, outdated gear. Somehow humiliating a military superpower that should, on paper, win in hours. So what's going on? Because this isn't new. Not even close. Vietnam. Afghanistan. Iraq. Lebanon. Ukraine. Over and over again, the same pattern repeats. The smaller force doesn't just survive. Sometimes it wins. Not by being stronger. By being smarter. And once you see the pattern, really see it. You can't unsee it. Because modern warfare isn't what most people think it is. Not anymore. Part 2: The Superpower Illusion. Let's set the stage. A superpower military today, think the United States, Russia, China, spends anywhere from $70 billion to $800 billion a year. The US alone, $877 billion in 2023. According to the Pentagon budget. They have stealth jets that cost $80 million each. Aircraft carriers that cost $13 billion. Tanks like the M1A2 Abrams, 67 tons of steel. Thermal sights, depleted uranium armor. On paper it's overwhelming. Now compare that to a smaller force. Maybe they spend $1 billion. Maybe less. Sometimes not even a state. Just a network. Fighters and pickup trucks. Cheap rifles. Homemade bombs. This shouldn't even be a fight. And yet, it is. So let's walk through the actual mechanics. The real reasons why smaller forces keep punching above their weight. Not theories. Patterns. Proven, repeated, brutal patterns. And once you understand them, you'll start seeing every war differently. Part 3: Vietnam, the first pattern. Start with the most famous example. Vietnam. Officially, the United States versus North Vietnam and the Viet Cong. War period, 1955 to 1975. Peak U.S. troop deployment. About 543,000 soldiers in 1969. The U.S. dropped over 7.5 million tons of bombs. That's more than all sides combined in World War II. Let that sink in. More bombs than World War II. And they still lost. Why? Because the battlefield itself was hostile. Dense jungle. Visibility, often less than 20 meters. No clear front lines. No easy targets. The Viet Cong didn't wear uniforms. They blended in. Villagers by day. Fighters by night. You can't bomb what you can't find. Short line. That's rule number 1. The smaller force chooses where the fight happens. Always. Part 4: Guerrilla Warfare. And they didn't just hide. They adapted. The Viet Cong built over 250 kilometers of underground tunnels. In areas like Cu Cai. Entire ecosystems underground, kitchens, hospitals, weapon caches. American soldiers would clear a village. And the fighters were already beneath them. Waiting. Or gone. Hit. Disappear. Repeat. Guerrilla warfare, which sounds technical, just means this. You don't fight the enemy head-on. You hit them when they're weak. Then vanish before they respond. Simple. Brutal. Effective. Part 5: The Ambush. There's a story. Sergeant James Miller, 24, from Ohio. 1968. Patrol near the Mekong Delta. His unit had air support, artillery, superior weapons. Didn't matter. They were walking through a narrow path. When the first explosion hit. Improvised explosive device, basically a homemade bomb buried under dirt. Then gunfire. From everywhere. Or nowhere. They couldn't see the enemy. Couldn't aim properly. Couldn't even tell where the shots were coming from. It lasted 90 seconds. That's it. By the time reinforcements arrived, the attackers were gone. Miller survived. Half his squad didn't. It wasn't a battle. It was an ambush. And that's the point. The smaller force doesn't fight your war. They force you into theirs. Part 6: Afghanistan Terrain and Technology. Now fast forward. Afghanistan. The Soviet Union invades in 1979. One of the most powerful militaries on Earth at the time. Over 100,000 troops deployed. They expected a quick victory. Instead, they got 10 years of grinding war. Why? Terrain. Mountains. Endless mountains. The Hindu Kush. Elevations over 4,000 meters. Narrow passes. Ambush heaven. Soviet tanks built for open European plains struggled. Helicopters became essential. And then came the Stinger. Short line. Everything changed. Part 7: Cheap weapon, expensive loss. The FIM-92 Stinger. Introduced in 1981. Weight about 15 kilograms. Range up to 4.8 kilometers. Heat-seeking, it locks onto the engine of an aircraft. The US supplied these to Afghan fighters. Before the Stinger, Soviet helicopters dominated. Mi-24 Hind gunships, heavily armed, armored, terrifying. After the Stinger, they became targets. According to CIA estimates, over 270 Soviet aircraft were shot down with Stingers during the war. Imagine being a pilot. You're flying low, supporting ground troops. Suddenly a beep. Lock-on warning. You have seconds. Maybe less. Then a missile traveling at Mach 2. Slams into your engine. Game over. Cheap weapon. Expensive loss. And here's the pattern forming. The smaller force doesn't match your strength. They attack your vulnerabilities. Part 8: Iraq, the IED War. Now Iraq. 2003 invasion. The US military rolls in. Within 3 weeks, Baghdad falls. Saddam Hussein's army collapses. On paper, total victory. But then the insurgency begins. And suddenly, the most powerful military in the world is being harassed by something incredibly simple. IEDs. Improvised explosive devices. Homemade bombs. Cost sometimes under $100. Effect devastating. Between 2003 and 2011, IEDs were responsible for about 60% of US casualties in Iraq. According to Pentagon data. Think about that. Not tanks. Not aircraft. Not large-scale battles. Roadside bombs. Why? Because every road becomes a threat. Every pile of trash. Every parked car. Every step. You slow down. You hesitate. You become predictable. And predictable means vulnerable. Part 9: Psychological Warfare. There's another story. Staff Sergeant Daniel Ruiz, 32. Convoy Commander, 2006, Baghdad. His job was simple. Move supplies from one base to another. Same route. Same time window. Same procedures. They knew it. The insurgents knew it. Day 14 of the route. A bomb detonates under the lead vehicle. Then small arms fire from rooftops. Then silence. Ruiz later said something chilling in an interview. You never feel safe. Not even when nothing happens. That's psychological warfare. And it works. Because war isn't just about destroying equipment. It's about exhausting the enemy. Mentally. Emotionally. Logistically. Part 10: Lebanon, no armor is safe. Now Lebanon, 2006. Israel versus Hezbollah. Israel, one of the most advanced militaries in the world. Air superiority. Precision weapons. Modern tanks like the Merkava IV. Hezbollah. A non-state actor. estimated 3,005,000 fighters at the time. And yet, they held for 34 days. How? Preparation. Hezbollah spent years building defensive networks in southern Lebanon, bunkers, anti-tank positions, hidden rocket launchers. When Israeli forces advanced, they weren't entering open ground. They were walking into layered defenses. And Hezbollah had one key weapon: anti-tank guided missiles, like the Russian-made Kornet. Range up to 5.5 kilometers. Armor penetration, over 1,200 m of steel equivalent. That's enough to punch through a modern tank. Even a Merkava. Short line. No vehicle is invincible. During the conflict, Hezbollah reportedly hit dozens of Israeli tanks. Some were destroyed, others damaged. The message was clear: heavy armor doesn't guarantee safety anymore. Part 11: The pattern. And here's where it gets interesting. Because all these examples, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, Lebanon, they're not random. They follow a pattern. A system. The smaller force does four things consistently. They control the environment. They avoid direct confrontation. They exploit weaknesses. And they stretch the conflict over time. Time is their weapon. That's the part most people miss. Superpowers rely on speed, shock, decisive victories. Smaller forces rely on endurance. They don't need to win every battle. They just need to not lose. And that changes everything. Part 12: Time wins. Because time has a cost. Money, lives, political will. The US spent over $2 trillion in Afghanistan. Over 20 years. According to Brown University's Costs of War project. 20 years. For a war that started with overwhelming dominance and ended with withdrawal in 2021. Short line. Time wins. Part 13: The new era. But now something new is happening. Something that makes all of this even more dangerous. Technology is getting cheaper. Dramatically cheaper. Drones. Commercial ones. You can buy them online for $1,000, $500, sometimes less. Add a camera. Add a small explosive. Now you have precision strike capability. At a fraction of the cost. No Air Force required. No runway. No pilot training for years. Just a laptop. In practice. Which brings us to today. Ukraine. Because everything we've talked about, it's all happening again. But faster. Cheaper. More visible than ever before. In the next category of warfare. It changes the equation completely. Part 1: Drone warfare up close. You hear the buzz first. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just there. Like an insect you can't quite see. Then someone shouts. Too late. The drone dips. A small object drops. Half a second later, a sharp, contained explosion. Inside a trench barely 2 meters wide. No warning system. No radar lock. No siren. Just a $700 machine. Deciding who lives and who doesn't. That's modern war. Up close. Personal. Relentless. Part 2: The Ukraine reality. Let's talk about Ukraine. 2022 to now. A full-scale war between Russia, a nuclear superpower, with one of the largest militaries on Earth, and Ukraine, a country with a fraction of that budget. Russia's military spending in 2024. Estimated $120 billion. Ukraine's pre-war budget. Under $10 billion. On paper, this shouldn't be close. And yet by mid-2023, Russia had lost, visually confirmed, over 2,000 tanks. According to the open-source intelligence group Oryx. That's not speculation. That's counted wrecks. Burned hulls. Abandoned armor. Drone footage of impacts. So what changed? Part 3: The rise of cheap drones. Drones. Not the big ones you're thinking of. Not the $30 million MQ-9 Reaper. The small ones. Cheap. Disposable. Everywhere. Part 4: Weaponized commercial drones. Start with the simplest. Commercial quadcopters. Think DJI Mavic series. Weight around 900 grams. Flight time 25 to 40 minutes. Cost $1,000 to $3,000 depending on the model. Originally designed for photography. Now, weaponized. Operators attach improvised release mechanisms. Often 3D printed to drop grenades or modified munitions. Accuracy. Within a meter. From 50 to 100 meters above. That's surgical. And terrifying. Because there's no warning. No defense system built into a tank or trench. For something this small, this quiet, this cheap. Short line. Everyone is exposed. Part 5: FPV. The drone becomes the weapon. Then it escalates. FPV drones first-person view. Originally used for racing. Speed up to 150 kilometers per hour. Range several kilometers with signal boosters. Cost sometimes under $500. But here's the difference. These aren't dropping bombs. They are the bomb. Operators wear goggles. They see exactly what the drone sees. They steer it directly into the target. A tank hatch, a bunker entrance, a moving vehicle. Impact detonation. Precision-guided missile. For the price of a smartphone. And Ukraine is using thousands of them. By late 2024, Ukrainian officials claimed production of over 1 million FPV drones annually. 1 million. That's industrial scale. Part 6: The economics of destruction. There's a name you should remember. Andriy, 29. Former IT worker from Lviv. Before 2022, he wrote code for a logistics company. Now, he's a drone pilot. His unit operates FPV drones near Bakhmut. He trains for hours on simulators. Then he goes live. His targets: armored vehicles, supply trucks, sometimes individual soldiers. In 1 week, his team destroyed or damaged 12 vehicles. Total cost of their drones, under $10,000. Estimated value of destroyed equipment: over $5 million. Do the math. It's not even close. Part 7: Electronic warfare. The counter. So why doesn't the big military just stop them? They try. Electronic warfare, which sounds complicated, is basically using radio signals to jam or hijack enemy communications. Drones rely on signals. Cut the signal. You kill the drone. Russia deploys systems like the Krasika 4. Ukraine uses systems like Bukovel AD. These can jam GPS, disrupt control links, even force drones to crash. And sometimes it works. But here's the problem. Part 8: The adaptation loop. You jam one frequency. They switch to another. You block GPS. They fly manually. You shut down a sector. They launch from somewhere else. Short line. It's a cat and mouse game. And the mouse is getting smarter. Faster. Cheaper. Part 9: Scale changes everything. Which brings us to the real shift. Not just drones. Scale. Because superpower militaries are built around expensive, high-performance systems. Fewer units. Higher capability. That works. If you can protect them. But what happens when the enemy can field thousands? Tens of thousands of cheap systems. You can't shoot them all down. You can't afford to. A surface-to-air missile might cost $100,000. The drone it's targeting, $500. You lose that exchange. Every time. Part 10: The broken equation. And this is where the pattern snaps into focus. Right here. Most people think military power is about having the best technology. The most advanced jets. The heaviest tanks. The smartest missiles. It's not. Not anymore. It's about cost efficiency and destruction. Short line. Cheap kills expensive. That's the equation. Part 11, Strategic Collapse. And right now it's broken. Because a $500 drone destroying a $3 million tank isn't just a tactical win. It's a strategic nightmare. Multiply that across thousands of engagements. You don't just lose equipment. You lose the ability to sustain war. Part 12, The Pattern Revealed. This is the aha moment. The thing everything points to. Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, Lebanon, Ukraine. Different decades. Different weapons. Same outcome. The smaller force wins not by matching power, but by breaking the economics of war. Part 13, Why Superpowers Lose. They make it too expensive for you to keep fighting. Too slow. Too politically costly. Too exhausting. And eventually, you leave. Not because you were defeated in a single battle, but because you couldn't justify continuing. That's how superpowers lose. Not with a bang, but with a decision. Part 14, Cost Imposition. There's a phrase military analysts use. Cost imposition. It means forcing your enemy to spend more resources than they can afford. The smaller force does this perfectly. Every IED. Every ambush. Every drone strike. It's not just damage. It's a bill. And the bill keeps growing. Until someone decides it's not worth it anymore. Part 15, The Next Phase, Swarms. And now we're entering the next phase. Swarms. Not one drone. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. Coordinated. Semi-autonomous. China has demonstrated drone swarms. Launched from trucks and aircraft. Over 200 units in coordinated flight tests. The US is developing similar systems. Under programs like Replicator. The idea is simple. Overwhelm defenses through sheer numbers. Part 16, Quantity Becomes Power. You can't track them all. You can't shoot them all. And if even a fraction gets through, that's enough. Short line. Quantity becomes quality. Part 17, The Future Battlefield. Imagine defending a base. Radar lights up. Not one target. 50. Then 100. Then more. Each one small. Fast. Cheap. Your defense system prioritizes. Fires interceptors. You run out. They don't. Part 18, War Becomes Personal. That's the future battlefield. Not fewer better machines. More. Way more. And for the individual soldier, it changes everything. You're no longer worried about tanks on the horizon. Or jets overhead. You're worried about something you can't see. Something small. Persistent. Always watching. Always waiting. You can't relax. Not for a second. That's the real impact. Constant pressure. Constant threat. Short line. War becomes personal. Part 19, Are Superpowers Obsolete? So where does this leave us? Are superpowers obsolete? No. They still have overwhelming capabilities. Air power. Naval dominance. Nuclear deterrence. Which just means weapons so destructive. They prevent war by existing. But in limited conflicts. Against smaller adaptive enemies. The advantage is no longer absolute. It's conditional. And fragile. Part 20, The Final Shift. Because every new expensive system has to survive in a world where cheap systems are hunting it relentlessly. In this pattern, it's spreading, not just in war zones. Any group with access to technology, knowledge and time can apply it. That's the uncomfortable truth. Power is decentralizing. Control is slipping. And the gap between small and strong is closing. Faster than most people realize. Part 21, Final Thought. Because in the end, it's not about who has more power. It's about who uses it better. Short line. And right now, The small guys are learning fast. Very fast.